our YouTube channel. Search Out of Bounds Sports. That's pretty easy. Watch the show on the old YouTube. And we have HD robotic cameras in studio. We're fancy. So you can watch us on TV webcast. YouTube. Go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube page if you would. Search Out of Bounds Sports. You're also listening to ESPN 105.9 The Zone. And Blake has been in the storytelling mode today, or mood, as far as
either one.
He traveled through Colorado in an RV in college, and he was also a camp counselor in Colorado. So those were good times. And then we identified Blake as someone who looks like he owns or works at a craft brewery. There's all sorts of things going on the show, the Out of Bounds Show. ESPN 105.9 The Zone. Brought to you by Went McGee, the mortgage man. He'll shop the best rates for you as you're buying a home, condo, or townhouse or refinancing. Went McGee, mortgagemanms.com, mortgagemanms.com. We want to welcome in Jon Ledyard, Tampa Bay Buccaneers insider, Tom Brady to Tampa Bay, and a lot going on for Ledyard and the crew. He's with Pewter Report, and he is one of our NFL insiders. And, John, before we get into Brady, were you ever a camp counselor?
I was, actually, yeah. I was a camp counselor all 3 summers that I was in college, and I actually work now part-time helping out with a camp in this area, an athletic sports Christian camp in the summers, working on their leadership team and helping them with recruiting in the offseason. So I'm a big camp guy. I love it.
That's awesome. That is awesome. Well, tell me, so your world got – in a good, well, with everything that's going on, your world in a good way got turned upside down when Tom Brady decided to go to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. John, I think a lot of people thought Teddy Bridgewater may be headed to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And now you've got Brady. Describe what it's been like the last week covering, 1, the NFL, but 2, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers with the GOAT headed to Tampa Bay.
Yeah, I think it's been really cool because in Tampa Bay, you know, everybody, you're going to hear this a lot over the next couple of years, especially if the Bucs have success. You're going to hear kind of this, oh, everybody's a Bucs fan now. I didn't even know there were Bucs fans before this, but there have been. There's just not much. I mean, the Bucs haven't had much reason for anyone to notice their fan base, but they have a really strong, loyal fan base that kind of lives and dies with everything that the team does. And I have been really excited to work and talk with those people since I started a Pewter Report. So I'm mostly excited for them. You know, for me, it's fun because I just started there, and now it's kind of this, oh, Brady's there. And so the NFL lens has kind of shifted its way to Tampa Bay, probably for the first time since they won that Super Bowl. And even that, you know, most people forget that they won that Super Bowl in the early 2000s. And so I think that it is a unique position for Tampa Bay to be in, but also a really good one because they have a good thing going there. Bruce Arians being hired as head coach, I think has been a culture shock for them. They've got some of the bad apples out of the locker room that have plagued them in the past. They're a physical, disciplined, focused on football team, and that's kind of so adding now to that, one of the greatest leaders and most focused on football people of all time, and Tom Brady, without even speaking of his on-field skill set, is just really exciting because there's a direction this team can go if they get more consistent quarterback play, and you're almost guaranteed to get that from Tom Brady as opposed to what Jameis Winston offered last season. So if the rest of the young pieces in the secondary and the offensive line can take another step forward after finishing the season really strong over the second half of 2019, I think this franchise will really be headed in a pretty exciting direction.
He is Jon Ledyard talking Tampa Bay Buccaneers football, pewterreport.com. Tom Brady, their starting QB, and they will play the New Orleans Saints twice this year, and that's the team in our backyard. So that kind of got Saints fans' attention as Breeze and Brady will go head-to-head at least a couple of times as they wrap up their career. You know, Arians is he's a chiseled veteran, so to speak, and he's coached some big-time QBs and Roethlisberger and Luck and Palmer, among others. So I don't think that will be a big deal. Tampa Bay was 7-7 going into the final 2 weeks of the season last year, John, as you know, and Jameis just literally threw them out of both or turnovered them out of both games. So this team has the players in the line of scrimmage, O-line and D-line, and they've got the skill guys, and now they have Brady. They weren't far off, were they, John?
No, they really weren't, and I think it's probably logical to expect that somebody's going to hit a little bit of a stumbling block out of that secondary group. Hopefully it's not multiple guys. Somebody's going to hit a stumbling block either in year 2 or year 3 for Carlton Davis, or, there's going to be some understanding needed there as those guys continue to develop and grow into positions. Justin Evans didn't play all last season and the second half of 2018 season because of a foot injury. It's still uncertain whether he's going to be able to return. And if he isn't, then they might be looking to draft a free safety. They like their safety room, but there isn't really a true ball hawk free safety back there. So that's one position, to keep an eye out for. Right tackle as well. They don't really have a right tackle right now. DeMar Dotson may end up re-signing here for a year, but he's 33, and so they're looking for the future there. But other than those two positions, you have to feel pretty good about the Bucs lineup across the board, especially given the way, like I said, they finished 2019. But I do think that there's some room to add some more depth, and you're kind of banking on all these young, exciting players kind of taking another step in the development to get the team where it needs to be, which, to be honest, is over teams like the Saints and the 49ers. And I don't know whether we could, really say that they're there yet. They're in position to do that, though.
That was my next question. So with the NFC South and the Saints, the way that they played the last couple of years, which is really, really well, and could have won a Super Bowl, how much has Tampa Bay closed the gap with the Saints right now? I know there's going to be other things play out personnel-wise and so on, but how much did the Buccaneers close the gap with the Saints with the acquisition of Tom Brady?
I really think it's going to come down to Drew Brees and Tom Brady. Last year Brees looked a lot better, younger, just better all around. Obviously, way better offense with much better receivers than Michael Thomas, especially than Tom Brady had. So you have to weigh the situation for sure. But last year that was the case. This year, Brady is going to be in obviously a much better situation. So how that kind of evens those two out is going to be key. Because in my opinion, the Bucs can win. They can be a playoff team. They could have been a playoff team maybe even if Brady doesn't end up there, if they get somebody who can take care of the football, still make enough plays in the passing game. There was like a happy medium kind of between the recklessness of Jameis and what you're getting with Tom Brady, where they still could have been a successful football team, but no one would have taken them seriously as a contender, even if they made it as like the 6th or now 7th seed in the playoffs. Nobody would have taken them seriously as a contender against teams, like San Francisco or New Orleans or Green Bay or any of those teams. Now with Brady, I think when it comes to those kinds of matchups where they might not need him to beat the Falcons or the Panthers this year, that they may need Brady to be great or better than Brees in those types of matchups. And so last year, I don't know if he would have been. This year, he may be able to, but I think that's really what it's going to come down to. The Saints are certainly stronger in areas like the offensive line and probably in the secondary as well, more developed than the Buccaneers are. And so those areas where the field will matter. But I think Brady, if he can outplay Brees in those matchups, in those high-profile matchups in general for the Bucs, that is kind of where this team could go from a good team that'll probably make the playoffs to a team that's a true Super Bowl contender if he can get back to that level that he was at in 2018.
Interesting. Tom Brady to the Buccaneers. He is Jon Ledyard, PewterReport.com, Tampa Bay Bucs insider. He joins us on the Miller Lite guest line. You're listening to ESPN 105.9 The Zone. You can also watch on our YouTube channel. Search Out of Bounds Sports. Let's segue here to I may get into Bridgewater here in a second for Saints fans, but one team that you didn't throw out that, there's two teams that we're really locked into here, and that's the Saints, so the Bucs tie in, and then the Dallas Cowboys because of Dak Prescott. How do you think that marriage partnership could look with Dak Prescott and Mike McCarthy, John?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, I think. McCarthy, one of the things that everybody has to kind of take into consideration when they think, oh, this is what McCarthy does and this is what Dak does, is that McCarthy is kind of claimed to have changed basically his process in a lot of ways. One of the things that made McCarthy offenses struggle a little bit is that all of his receivers' routes kind of happened independently of each other a little bit, and there weren't concepts that helped open people up. So when they had 5 elite receivers, which they had for a while, things worked great. And then as soon as that talent started to fall off and injuries happened and guys got older, I think that's when you saw things start to break down for the offense. Guys didn't get open as easily as they did. And Aaron Rodgers struggled to develop trust with some of the newer guys they brought in too. You know, they would make a mistake. He would kind of not want to throw it to them when they were open. And so there were more issues beyond just McCarthy's scheme. But I do think it's worth criticizing that part of his scheme a little bit. Now you go to Dallas, and I think Michael Gallup had a really great second season. Amari Cooper's one of the best guys at getting open on his own that there is. So we'll see what has changed with McCarthy. He has kind of talked continuously about how analytics are a bigger part of things. He visited Pro Football Focus and has a lot of value in what they do and what they provide to teams. So his whole perspective on things could have changed, or it could just be lip service to get another chance in the NFL. So there's a lot of unknown with McCarthy, more unknown, I think, than we typically get with repeating head coaches. So we'll see all that develops. Physically, I don't think there's many limitations with Dak, but he would be wise to continue to use Dak's legs as a part of that offense.
Well, yeah, I hope that they actually think they need to use Dak's legs more.
Agreed.
And I don't understand why Garrett and Kellen and Linehan and so on didn't. But, okay, so though, that Dak is a guy who can the chemistry thing's not a problem and the ego thing's not a problem, whereas there's always been word that working with Aaron Rodgers could be a little difficult. So you feel like they'll be able to – the relationship will be there and they'll be able to match up and work together and at some point get on the same page, John?
Yeah, I do think that's going to be the case. There's no question. You're right. Dak is a totally different person than Aaron Rodgers. And, everybody is really, Rodgers is unique in both of what makes him great and what makes him difficult to work with, I think. And so I think Dak, with him, you're getting a guy that's going to be much more open and willing to learn and adapt and do things McCarthy's way. The question is, how good is that? How much is that way kind of developed and changed and grown as the league's grown? McCarthy has always been kind of on the forefront of some really strong, positive NFL trends too, getting away from running and pounding the football, spreading the field a little bit more when you do run the football so you get defenders out of the box and you're more effective going for it more on fourth and short. So there's been some really positive trends of McCarthy as a coach even in the past, which suggests he's always been kind of willing and able to take in new information and adapt from there. I think that's the big line of demarcation between other just coaches and great coaches. And so I think he's always shown some tendency to move that way. If his scheme can develop a little bit too, I think Dallas is going to have a really successful offense. Okay.
What about, does Mike McCarthy – we're talking Dak Prescott and the Dallas Cowboys with Jon Ledyard, NFL insider, pewterreport.com. He joins us on the Miller Lite guest line. And you're listening to ESPN 105.9 The Zone. Does Mike McCarthy's offense devalue Zeke Elliott?
Yeah, it does. It has in the past anyway. There's no question about it. The Cowboys won't be a team that, or they shouldn't be anyway, because they were a less effective offense. Even though I know there's the stats, when Zeke carried the ball this many times or when Zeke ran for 100 yards, they won the game. That stat doesn't mean anything because you're running the ball when you're up big in games, and you could give him, 10 carries that could take him over 100 yards that you wouldn't have normally given him if the game was close. So, that stat doesn't really mean what people think it means. And so that offense has been more effective for a couple of years now when they aren't pounding Zeke Elliott, 25 times a game. And now with Travis Frederick retiring and Tyron Smith, struggling with injuries, they just aren't suited to be able to do that, nor should they be. The NFL league today is a passing league, and they can do that pretty effectively. They have the weapons to make things happen in that regard. And so if I'm Dallas, I'm not even, if I'm Dallas fans, I'm not even worried about that. Zeke will get touches. He won't get them in bunches like he did before, but your offense is going to be more successful because you're not running the ball on every second and, 9 and second and 10,
right.
You're passing the ball in those situations. And so I think their offense will be more successful by moving away from Zeke. The question is, how much does Zeke get involved in the passing game? Because that's something, that I think Mike McCarthy's always valued in his offense. Does he take on more of that role, or does Tony Pollard? And if it's Pollard, are we going to see Zeke join the ranks of regrettable, big contracts given to running backs, which basically every other running back in the league that's got a big contract has reached that point with their teams? Are we going to see that happen with Zeke this year? Or is he going to be able to adapt his game and be a bigger part of the passing game for Dallas?
You shake your head when you see a contract like that, don't you?
Right. Oh my gosh, yeah, absolutely. Because there is just a track record, and now everyone's starting to see it, that is just a terrible idea. It just is. They're running backs I love, but it just doesn't work out. It's not good. It's not, even if the guy were to stay healthy and not break down, which is extremely rare, you can just replace that production from a rushing standpoint so easily most of the time, that it just isn't a big deal. So I think teams are starting to learn that lesson more and more.
Except Jerry, of course.
Agency period. Except for that, there's always going to be a few that hold on to the old way things used to be. But like I said, great head coaches get it, and they realize that there is a big difference between the league the way it used to be and the league now, and you've got to kind of adapt yourself to be successful with the way the league runs today.
But how would you classify Jason Garrett? Average to below average head coach? That's how I would, but you look at numbers more than I do, John.
Oh, yeah, extreme. I mean, below average, poor, I would almost even say. I mean, because exactly what we're talking about, disinterest and inability to take in and process new information and change as a result of that information. The further he got away from Dallas's offense, the more successful the offense was, for periods of time when, they kind of gave Scott Linehan the reins for a while, and then, his style got very stale, and they brought Kellen Moore. And so things that happened outside of Jason Garrett helped them achieve whatever level of success they did, but situational game management was so poor with Garrett a lot of the time, third and short calls, fourth and short calls, being a part of that he was open about having a big input on, but also not going for it, not being aggressive enough on a lot of fourth and shorts, not being aggressive enough with game plans, was all something that he kind of was a part of for years there. And so, yeah, and he's spoken openly about analytics not being a big part of what they do and not needing that to happen. I'm the furthest thing from a math nerd you can find, but those things are a matter, and all the successful teams in the NFL use them a ton. I mean, San Francisco, Kansas City, Seattle, and to the New England. And so, I mean, I just think Baltimore a ton, and so I think that the trends have shown that is a poor way of thinking, and he didn't adapt, and because of that, he's no longer head coach.
Thank goodness. Out of bounds, ESPN 105.9 The Zone. Our guy, NFL insider, Jon Ledyard, PewterReport.com. He joins us on the Miller Lite guest line. Okay, so let's go back to the Saints and their running back. I think he's better than Zeke, but who knows? Kamara, it will be interesting to see what Loomis and Sean do, because the numbers show that his better years will be behind, and they took advantage of the last three. You wouldn't pay him big money, even though he is ridiculous talent, right?
Right. And that's the hard part. It gets to a point with some of these guys, with Kamara and McCaffrey, where they're almost like receivers for your offense. Those kind of guys. Zeke isn't that way. Gurley caught the ball well, but he never ran a lot of routes out of the backfield. He was mostly a screen guy, whatever the blocking got for him. He created those spaces. So you look at guys a little bit in terms of the role they operate in, and how you use them and how effective they are outside of just rushing the ball, because that part's replaceable, but the passing game work isn't quite as replaceable. So I would err more toward paying a guy like McCaffrey or Kamara, just because they are basically also receivers for your offense. Kamara's been like their number 2 receiver for years there. So
he's special, man.
Toward that, but right. He's great, and you want to get him the ball. So I'd err more toward paying guys like that than other backs. But I still think you got to be really careful with the Saints cap situation. The way that it is, I'm just not sure they're going to be able to do it, nor should they do it.
Okay. All right. So what does Emmanuel Sanders do for the New Orleans Saints and Breeze and Sean Payton?
A tremendous addition. Anybody who landed Sanders it was just going to be a tremendous addition. Guy's a competitor. He's one of those guys whose game is going to age very well. I think you're going to see him, if he desires to keep playing, he's going to have a couple more good years, because he's so smart. He works so incredibly hard. And his game is even though he's always been a good athlete, his game has kind of been founded more on the ability to get open through technique and nuance and understanding of coverages, and that part isn't going to go away. So I think you'll see him follow a very Larry Fitzgerald type of career trajectory, where he's going to be still an important part of an offense late into his 30s, if that's what he so desires. He can play inside, he can play outside. He just brings a level of, I know how to get open to an offense, which is crucial. He's not a super big vertical threat, but he has that ability, and it was slept on, especially last year. San Francisco didn't really throw the ball deep a ton, so he wasn't utilized in that way a lot. But I mean, he can just create separation in throwing windows And when you're Breeze and, you're not wanting to put the ball up down the field, we saw last year 100 times a game anymore, those kind of guys are really, really valuable. So it's a smart addition. You can be flexible with he and Michael Thomas, and teams can't just take away Thomas. And they couldn't do that before, but now you've got a legit threat on the other side. So if they add one more guy, through the draft that maybe can stretch the field a little bit, I just think that offense is going to be tough. Bucks are going to have a tough time overcoming that offense.
Oh, wow. All right. So a little bit of Saints and Dak and the Cowboys from our guy, Jon Ledyard, NFL insider, pewterreport.com on the Miller Lite guest line. John, I've got 2 minutes. Let's wrap it up with this. What is Bill Belichick going to do at the QB position? Is he going to ride with Jarrett Stidham and maybe Hoyer, or is he going to go out and find someone else at some point?
Sure doesn't sound like they're interested in Jameis Winston or is anybody else, but that's another conversation for another time maybe. Cam Newton doesn't seem like it's going to be an option for New England based on everything kind of that a lot of the people more in the know have said on that situation. So it looks like they're going to try and ride with Stidham. Brian Hoyer's in the mix there. I think it's clearly the worst quarterback room in the league right now, but New England could be comfortable at that point to see what they get out of Stidham for a year. And if it's bad, then, they're picking high and they're in position to maybe get a Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields or somebody like that for that offense. And so I think that's kind of how they're viewing it right now. It seems like that could change. Maybe they get a chance to do a full medical workup on Cam Newton here if this coronavirus situation alleviates and he's still out there. Maybe that changes things and they decide he can still play. But Newton really hasn't been the same player for a couple of years now. So it doesn't surprise me that teams are kind of a little bit wary of him right now. So I think, they're going to ride with the young guy and see what he offers them. But ultimately, New England doesn't look like they'll be a contender this year, which is, I know, a tough thing to put into words. And I take a risk of it coming back to bite me. But that roster just isn't close to competing in a lot of key areas, I think.
Wow. We'll wrap it up there. Jon Ledyard, NFL insider. Follow John on Twitter at Ledyard NFL Draft, at Ledyard NFL Draft. And, of course, pewterreport.com or at Pewter Report, throwing up some great content. And of course, he's been busy with Brady and the other stuff going on in the league. One thing that we have had in sports is some great NFL topics and storylines. John, take care of yourself. Be safe. We'll do this again soon, man. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
All right, bud. Jon Ledyard, pewterreport.com, NFL insider, joining us on the Miller Lite guest line. The Out of Bounds Show is brought to you by our friends at Rick's Pro Truck and RPT. Spray and bed liners, lift kits, WeatherTech floor guards, you name it, they've got it. #1 Jeep truck accessory stores in the great state of Mississippi, ricksprotruck.com. 2 retail locations, Lakeland Drive, Flowood, and their new one in Gluckstadt, Madison County. RPT, ricksprotruck.com. Also follow them on Facebook and Instagram at Rick's Pro Truck. Man, we have had a good show today. Blake Scott shared some touring around Colorado in an RV and the fact that he was a camp counselor in Colorado. And he's also acknowledged, to me, this was the real breakthrough. He's acknowledged that he's both stubborn and petty. Hour number 3 coming up.